Live, it is an invitation to step out of survival mode and become a more formidable version of yourself. That's international speaker and author Erik Kruger's new life-changing book titled Dangerous. According to Kruger, Dangerous is about taking back control and stepping into your power. It applies to everyone from nurses to pastors to parents to CEOs, entrepreneurs, teachers, couples, the list goes on. Now, he joins us on Zoom to tell us more about the book. Erik, a very good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
What was the inspiration for the book? What really inspired you to put ink on paper?
Well, it really started about 3 years ago. I was having a conversation with a coaching client that I was working with at that time. And it was just so obvious to me that he was stuck in survival mode. And we wanted to try and figure out, how do we help him to escape survival mode? How do we help him to be formidable again in the areas of life that he cares about? And that kind of set me out on this whole mission to try and decode, what does it look like for us to be operating and playing at our very best?
And why do you think this is an important message right now?
I think it's important because, we are dealing with a lot of uncertainty all the time, and the reality is that everything that you love is being threatened in some way or the other. And those threats are to your business, to your life, to your relationships, to your health. And ultimately, what the book's biggest call to action is how will you become a threat to those threats? Knowing that those things exist, knowing that those things are threatened, what will you do? How will you reconfigure how you think, feel, and act so you can overcome those threats and those challenges?
And the title is quite provocative. Tell us more about it, because when you think of dangerous, so many things go through your mind.
Yeah, for sure. And in South Africa, we obviously have a very strong relationship with that word. But if you think of any sports team running out onto the field, so think back to Tiger Woods in his heyday, you see him walk onto the course and we say he's dangerous. And you say he's dangerous not because he's going to take a club to someone's face. We say it in the best way possible. What we mean when we say he's dangerous is that he has a way of looking at the game, a certain level of skill, experience that makes him very formidable in that arena. And when I say I want you to be dangerous, that's the kind of dangerous that I'm speaking about. It is, how do we make sure that we calibrate your thinking, your feeling, and your acting, your wit, your intellect, your skill, so that you can overcome whatever is in front of you, so you can be a threat to the threat.
And do you think the message of this book applies to everyone?
Definitely. Everyone has a threat somewhere. Often we are ineffective. When we are ineffective, we get into survival mode. None of us want to be there. We all want to be effective against our threats. And I mainly work with organizations and teams and leaders around us. And I see over and over that this is something they need to spend time with.
Do you think the book then offers solutions in terms of, countering whatever threats that our lives or our businesses may be faced with?
Definitely. The book is sort of broken into two sections, and it's a very short, quick read. I wanted it to be something you can pick up and finish in one sitting and then just go and do something with it. But the first part of the book is a call to danger. It's I want to inspire you to take up this idea and reframe this word for yourself. And then the second part is how to be dangerous. So how do we recognize those failures in how we think, feel, and act? And what do we do to remedy it so that we can be more effective against the threat, so we can be more formidable, and so that we can find ways to escape survival mode? And not just escape it, because survival, it's not good enough, and just escaping it isn't good enough. How do we get to the point where we are thriving and actually living the life that we want?
So in your line of work, Erik, and in the process of writing this book, what kind of threats would you say that people grapple with on a regular basis?
Sure. There are so many, the threats range from competitors that are opening up in the market to big volatility in the external markets, to your inability to say no to snacks, to the complacency that we have in terms of, we become successful. And it's actually this is a big way of getting into survival mode, is that we become so complacent because things are going well, and then it starts blunting and dulling our skill, our senses, and we kind of slip our way into survival mode. So even success can become a threat if you don't pay attention to what's happening for you internally.
Yeah, and the book covers the hero's journey. Just take us through the different stages.
Yeah, so the hero's journey is this idea popularized by Joseph Campbell, who wrote it in a book called The Hero of a Thousand Faces. And essentially what it says is that every hero goes on a very predictable journey. It has 17 different phases, so I won't take you through all of that. But the reason why it's in the book and the reason why it really hits home for me and solidified this idea for me is because every hero at some point has to face the monster, the villain, the threat, the danger, right? Like we're all waiting for that moment to happen. And what we often see is that the hero will come into contact with the threat, the danger, and they lose. And they lose why? Because they are harmless. They don't have what it takes to overcome the threat. And then they go back through this process where you see them becoming dangerous. You see them training, like doing push-ups, running. Maybe it's like figuring out a belief they need to have about themselves. Maybe it's reconfiguring how they're thinking. Yeah. But they go through this process, and then when they eventually come into contact again with the threat, they overcome it. And they do that why? Because they've become a threat to the threat, a danger to the danger. They've become dangerous. And what is so important about that is we don't want to be dangerous for the sake of it. We want to be dangerous because when we overcome our threats, on the other side of it is the reward, is saving the love of your life, is saving the village, is personal, massive personal transformation. And so the hero's journey for me in this context is important to say there's a primal pull for us to be dangerous, but also there's a reason for you to do it. And that is that on the other side of threat lies your greatest opportunity.
And you say that others should be able to stand in your danger. What do you mean by this?
So I found this quote in a book. It was actually a book called Old Dangerous Woman. And it said that in the olden days, danger actually meant protect.
Okay.
And so how they would use it is that I stand in your danger. And what that means is I stand in your possibility to be dangerous, right? Your ability to be dangerous. So if you think about it, I was walking with my dogs in the park the other day, and I realized that if anything happened to us, if anyone came in and threatened us, then their ability to be a threat to the threat in that moment, their ability to be dangerous, actually protects me. Mm-hmm. And that is what, so I'm able to stand in their danger. And what this idea tells us is that us being dangerous is actually good for the people around us. Mm. When I've spoken for big groups, I often hear mothers coming out and saying, like, this is the thing that resonated for me because you're right. Like, if something had to threaten my kids, I would be a threat to that threat. Like, I'd be dangerous in that moment in an instant. And that means that your kids get to stand in your danger. So it's basically a positive kind of danger, right? For sure, that's it.
Yeah. So how do people then get stuck in survival mode?
Well, one way would be that you have these threats of complacency. You, through success, become dull and you just kind of slip back into survival mode. And then the other is that we don't pay attention to the threats that are around us. Right. Sometimes they are quite big and quite obvious, like the pandemic. Like you come face to face with this big threat and it just knocks you back into survival mode. Like, everyone around you knows that you are in survival mode. But then I think there are often these smaller threats, that we don't pay attention to. And over time, these small threats accumulate until they become a big threat. And then that puts you back into survival mode. So for example, you have this small pain in your chest one day and you're like, I'll just shrug that off. Instead of paying attention to that small threat that says something is wrong. And when do we then pay attention? We pay attention a year down the line when you have the massive heart attack and you're like, okay, now I need to change how I do things. Those small threats should also be paid attention to because they are the ones that, they kind of sneak in on a Tuesday afternoon and disrupt your life.
All right. Erik, lovely chatting to you, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Great stuff. That was international speaker and author Erik Kruger's new life-changing book titled Dangerous.
Dive into the world of local and international sport each Saturday on Sports Live. Hosts Zai Khan, Simon Berg and Tabisa Sitole break down your week's favourite and maybe